Today's talk, money talks. And I want to start with 3 quotes. Having a strong picture or mental concept of that which we desire and holding to that mental equivalent, regardless of circumstances or conditions, we must sooner or later manifest according to the concept, by Ernest Holmes. I took this other small quote out of Deuteronomy. The purpose of tithing is to teach you always to put God first in your lives. And the third quote, again by Ernest Holmes, is God gives some more than others because some accept more than others. So when I was putting this together, I was thinking, what would it mean if the thoughts we have actually influence what happens in our lives? And we just pondered on that question because we know our thoughts do have great influence in our lives. Another question that came up for me was, what if all thoughts, conscious or not, were shaping our world? What if your destiny was totally in your own hands? And what if the quality of your life was determined by what you think all day long? So it got me thinking. Money talks. And prospering, having money, and tithing, I believe, go hand in hand. And as I was putting this together, I realized that there's 4 ideas that when you integrate them, it really speaks to how money talks. The first one is, I believe it's a calling to prosper. The second one is, know your mental equivalent around money. The third one, tithing opens the flow. And the fourth is the voice of money. So let's start with this idea of prosperity and that it's a calling. I believe it's a calling to prosper because we were meant to live this full spectrum life, this full flourishing life. And I see it as we are mirroring these teachings out from Science of Mind that Ernest Holmes brought forth, living from the inside out. And that it is our calling from within to show that this is possible, to have heaven right here on earth, that each of us, we are a spiritual leader. Within each of us, there's this voice and this divine intelligence, this brilliant voice that's constantly there at our beck and call. And some might refer to it as our higher self or our divine self, but it's available all day long. And we can ask it questions about our health. We can ask it, is this a good investment for us to do with our money? We can ask it about our vocation. Is this a vocation that I'm feeling purposeful in? Is it time to change? Is there some way that I could expand? We can ask it about our current relationships or relationships with significance that we may want to bring into our life, whether they're around our own children or a significant intimate relationship. But as we listen to this voice, we get these answers all day long. But the key is that we have to listen to this voice because it gets us into this flow of prosperity. It's the voice that is guiding us toward prosperity. It's a calling. I remember when I was called to be a minister, it was that same thing. It was a very strong voice, but it was a voice from within. So number 1, we are called to listen to this divine intelligence, that it has a voice and that it is always speaking to us. So point number 1, it is a calling to prosper. Point number 2 is, how does our mental equivalent play in with this idea of prospering? Having a strong picture. We think in pictures, not in words, but in pictures. And this concept, this desire, when we have this image very clearly in our mind of our mental equivalent, regardless, as Ernest said, of the circumstances or conditions that are presenting in our life, it's like this invisible law goes before us and paves the way. That's this divine intelligence paving the way. We're getting on the highway to the divine. And as Ernest says, and we believe in Science of Mind, that this mental equivalent is that heaven can be right here on earth, right here and right now. And it is to the degree and the embodiment that we can hold this mental equivalent of a match for that which is seeking us. It's this image, our mental equivalent, a picture of that which is seeking us. So what does our full flourishing life even look like? For you, it's different than for me. So do you have this really clear mental equivalent in your mind, this image of where you're going, your map, your roadway, and are you checking in with this voice within, this divine intelligence that is seeking this greater expression? It's all this mirror, this mental equivalent. So I had put out this intention for, and we did it with our last talk with Reverend Linda, around our intentions for 2018. I went with my son, I drove up, we set some intentions. In that intention that I set with my vision for 2018, I put down that I wanted to bring forth this year passive income. And I had created that last year, but something transitioned by the end of the year, and that was no longer there. So I thought, okay, what ways can I open up to passive income? Would you think it's a coincidence that while I was up there with my son, way up on the top of the mountain where I shouldn't even have gotten cell service, that I get a phone call from this investment company? Would you be interested in investing with us? It's a passive income opportunity. I had literally written it down on my intention sheet sitting there with my son. This is exactly how this law works, this mental equivalent. So it's key to have a clear picture in your mind, an image of what that thriving, what that full flourishing life looks like for you, that mental equivalent, so that when conditions and circumstances haven't yet yielded, you will step into pulling this image up in your mind's eye. And this is this part of this divine that goes before us, opening the way for us. So point number 2, your mental equivalent is the starting point for stepping into this flow of prospering. Number 3, tithing opens the flow. For me, how does tithing affect our relationships and our health and our prosperity? Well, prosperity to me is this embodiment of the divine within. And it's made manifest in all areas of our life, in our health, in our relationships, in our finances, and of course in our bank account and in our work, how we express ourselves. And it always reminds me of when I was growing up, and there were farmers all around us. And I remember we didn't do crops, but there were many around us that did. And when they would, in the fall, harvest, whether that was for corn, which was quite big in our area, they always left a certain amount of the crop to seed for the next year. To me, this is exactly what tithing is. We are putting these seeds out and knowing, trusting in this flow, in this truth, like the farmer that knew that you're seeding your crops of greater good coming back to you. And where do we tithe? I've always felt that, and I've read on this, Catherine Ponder, I've studied her intensely over the years, and I believe that it truly is where we're spiritually fed. That's where we tithe. Whatever's raising us to that mental equivalent, that's where we give. This is what's feeding us. And this isn't the old concept of you give to the church you go to. If that church is not feeding you, it's where you are being fed is where you give, where you tithe. And this, I see it as it blesses and multiplies as we give, as we tithe. It gets us in this flow, this seeding our crops. And when I think about, I put out this blessing, I bless my family, I bless my wallet, I bless those that I work with. It's seeding all day long. We have this mental equivalent opportunity to be putting this in our thoughts through a regular structured giving. And many here already give that through that, but there's a consciousness behind it. That's what I'm saying, to attune to tap into this gracious giving and this flow of law of circulation, knowing that it's at work and knowing that you're part of a spiritual community, that you're in this flow as a result of this continual giving. And that tithing, I see it as there's a trusting and a goodness of God. And that's this inner power that's already within us, that experiencing the goodness of God, that there is a flow, and that by embodying this even greater in our everyday and listening to this voice, that there's an enlightenment that happens within each of us, an opening, a trust in that there is a goodness, and that even though all these things are going on around us, that there is that goodness that we can attune to, we can trust in, and that we have a mental equivalent to. This is what opens and paves that way to prospering, whether you call it God, infinite intelligence, divine mind. We are the divine center of operation. We are in our mental equivalent, opening or closing that door for prosperity, for this flow. So this got me thinking, okay, my 4 points. So the 3 points being that it's a calling to prosper, that we are called to bring forth as examples that heaven is right here on earth. It's a calling. The second one, that our mental equivalent is key to this opening the floodgates, to this opening to being this mental equivalent, so that it ripples forth in our life, that it is a mirror. And the third one is that tithing, seeding our crops, that this too is what opens the flow. And the fourth point is what I want to close with by doing an exercise around this. And the fourth point is that there is a voice to our money, that money talks. And so let's just see what it's saying to us. So I want to do a couple of short questions and just see what comes up for each of you. And grab a pen and paper. Please write out the answers to these questions and let it flow. Let money talk to you so you can see what your mental equivalent is. First question is, money is. What comes after that in your mind? Money is. Just write out, finish that sentence. Money is, ... What is money to you? Money is. The next question is, how does it tend to show up in my life? Does it tend to show up as a paycheck, bonuses, serving clients? They pay you individually for a service. Might have multiple ways. How does money tend to show up in your life? Let's turn to the mental equivalent and how it's housed within you. Your monthly income right now is. So my monthly income is. This equates to how much weekly? The reason why we do weekly is I find that we can magnify our prosperity by a minimum of 30% when we focus on the weekly versus the monthly or the yearly, because of the mental equivalent. Recall your last 2 purchases over $200 that were not for a bill or an expense you had to do. Your last purchase or 2 purchases over $200. Outside of a commitment you had to do, like a phone bill, rent, mortgage, insurance. Last purchase, over $200, or 2 of the last purchases. What did each of these purchases represent to you, and the feelings associated with that purchase? Was it for self-care? Was it for giving? That might have been for tithing. Was it for something personal for you? And what was the feeling? Was it obligation? Was it joy? Was there a lightness? The next one is very revealing. So I highly recommend that even if you're driving and you're listening to this, you allow yourself to drop into this and see what your answer is. My life story is around money: a tragedy, a drama, a comedy, or an adventure. My life story around money is a tragedy, a drama, a comedy, an adventure. The next one is, how do you feel when you tithe? Do you feel a lightness? Are you trusting in this goodness? Are you listening to this voice? Oh, this is the percentage I'm to tithe. This is what I'm to give. How is tithing for you? Is it done freely? Is there anxiety? Is there a lightness? Is there an obligation? What is the energy behind tithing for you? And I want to close with this last question. What role do you play in your life story? Are you the hero around money, the savior, the joker? What role do you play in your life story around money? Money talks. Thank you.